Hello and welcome. You're on a channel where the lives of great people come alive and the most incredible stories from the past are revealed. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new captivating story, inspiring biography, or little-known facts that will change how you see history. Imagine this. On a cold December night, in a humble cabin buried in the snowy woods of New York, a child is born whose destiny will change not just the future of America, but the entire world. His name will become a synonym for wealth, power, intrigue, and scandal. He is John Davison Rockefeller, a man hailed by some as a visionary, by others as a ruthless monopolist. How did he rise from poverty to become the richest man of his age? What price did he pay to build his empire? And what secrets did he take to his grave? Settle in and get ready. The story ahead is filled with more drama, mystery, and triumph than any novel you've ever read. The Oil King, The Life and Times of John D. Rockefeller. Part 1, Shadows in Richford, Birth to Adolescence. A single candle sputtered in the dark. Its feeble flame clung to the wick, barely illuminating the cramped log cabin tucked into the dense woods at Richford, New York. Outside, December winds rattled the window panes and whispered secrets through the cracks. All was still. Then, a cry echoed, not of the winter wind, but of new life entering the world. John Davison Rockefeller was born on November 8, 1839, the second of 6 children in a family that teetered constantly between hope and turmoil. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, or Big Bill, was a towering, enigmatic figure, a man whose reputation drifted like rumor itself. By day, he declared himself a botanic physician, concocting mysterious potions and traveling the countryside in pursuit of customers. At night, he was a gambler, a schemer, and a shadow often gone without notice, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. John's mother, Eliza Davison, was the anchor, the quiet force who kept the family afloat. She was pious, frugal, and endlessly patient, instilling in her children lessons of thrift, hard work, and faith. Where Big Bill was bold and capricious, Eliza was steady and austere. John carried her lessons in his marrow, even as his father's world shimmered alluringly on the edges. From his earliest days, the world offered John D. Rockefeller no assurances, only challenges. The Rockefellers frequently moved, their fortunes rising and falling on the dice of Big Bill's next scheme. Money was always uncertain. The tight purse strings and learned self-denial shaped young John, teaching him survival, prudence, and hunger. The first enterprise. Even as a boy, John learned to turn uncertainty into opportunity. At 8, he was bargaining with neighbors, buying candies in bulk to resell at a profit to his siblings. When his pet turkey laid a clutch of eggs, he didn't admire the chicks. He sold them door to door. Each copper penny was cherished, dropped into an earthenware mug labeled savings. If one coin disappeared, he would spend hours searching the house, evidence of the seriousness with which he regarded even the smallest sum. But life was not just a tally of pennies and dimes. It was also a world of harsh lessons. John watched as Big Bill lied and cheated his way through life, sometimes bragging about his misdeeds at the supper table. "I cheat my boys every chance I get," Big Bill would say with a wicked grin, "to make 'em sharp." These games, cruel though they were, sharpened young John's mind, teaching him the difference between guile and honesty, cunning and duty. The intimacy of poverty was their family's daily existence. Homemade bread, thick with molasses, patchworked clothing, the near-sacred discipline of stretching every last dollar. Yet Eliza insisted the children always attend church, their shoes polished with lard to shine like patent leather. Every Sunday they sat in stony pews, absorbing sermons on the value of integrity and the punishment of excess. These contradictions, his father's deception and his mother's rectitude, were the crucible in which John's moral code and iron discipline were forged. Education of the mind and spirit. School held little glamour, but immense responsibility. He trudged daily to the country schoolhouse, repaired books with needle and thread when the binding split, and devoured every lesson. Numbers were his fascination. Columns of debt and credit spoke to him with more certainty than the shifting shadows of his father's promises. Yet the greatest classroom was the world itself. Every trial, each dashed hope. When a business deal failed, every pang of hunger became a teacher. The family relocated frequently as Big Bill favored one town over another. When they finally settled in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1853, young Rockefeller was barely 14. It was a frontier city, bustling with the smell of lake water, distant steam whistling, and the promise of industrial growth. Ohio, the land where America's future was being written in smoke, sweat, and invention. Here, a different kind of hunger welled up in John D., one that went beyond food and comfort. It was the gnawing desire for stability, respect, and most of all, control over his destiny. The world expands. Cleveland was a crucible of commerce, a bustling city at the edge of possibility. John's formal education was over by age 16, not for lack of ambition, but out of necessity. His father, ever unreliable, had vanished for another stretch, leaving Eliza and the children with mounting bills and dwindling hope. It was John's duty to help. He scoured the city for work, coat too small for his growing frame, resume handwritten in careful copperplate. 41 businesses rejected him. On the 42nd attempt, he was hired as an assistant bookkeeper at Hewitt and Tuttle Commission Merchants, trading in grain, coal, and lumber. For $16 a month, John eagerly embraced the world of business. To him, the columns of dollars and cents were poetry, a clear scorecard in a world that was usually opaque and unpredictable. The office became his second home. He arrived before dawn, often leaving long after sunset. He learned everything: how to negotiate, how to scrutinize contracts, how to spot risk and opportunity. Lap after lap, the lessons of his youth honed his abilities: discipline, thrift, focus. If a penny could be saved, it was saved and then invested. Rockefeller worked deliberately, rarely speaking, but always listening. His eyes missed nothing. He never gambled or drank. In a world run by flashy showmen and loudmouthed promoters, Rockefeller's quiet diligence made him stand out. A meeting of minds and ambitions. It was in Cleveland's hard-scrabble business world that John D. Rockefeller met Morris B. Clark, a kindred spirit 10 years his senior. Clark was wily, ambitious, and saw in young Rockefeller a mind to match his own. By age 19, Rockefeller proposed a partnership. They would start their own commission house, buying and selling grain, meats, and produce. On September 1st, 1859, with only $4,000, half of it borrowed at 10% interest, Rockefeller and Clark opened for business. The walls of their small office were almost bare. Rockefeller's ledgers, meticulously handwritten, became legendary in the small circles of Cleveland's growing merchant class. "Pay nobody a profit where you can do it yourself," he told Clark. "Bear all costs" became their motto. The Civil War was beginning. Markets convulsed, prices soared and crashed, Uncertainty was everywhere, but Rockefeller was steady, focusing always on the bottom line, weighing every risk, analyzing every possibility. As the grains moved, as the fortunes flowed oceans away to the hungry masses in Europe, John D. Rockefeller prospered. Through frugality, exactitude, and relentless focus, his business survived and thrived. Yet above all, he never forgot the world of shadows and light he left behind in Richford, the world of his father's schemes, his mother's prayers, and the lessons that had shaped him. The first secret. It was in those days, standing amid crates of produce and bales of hay, that Rockefeller first heard the whisper of oil, not just as a lubricant or lamp fuel, but as the substance that could transform America and perhaps the world. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, men were drilling deep into the earth and raising black gold to the surface. At first, oil was scooped up in buckets, poured into whiskey barrels, and carted to distant cities at enormous expense. But what Rockefeller saw was not just the oil, but the possibility beneath it. A new world, a new fortune, greater and more lasting than any wheat or pork. At night, as Cleveland slept, Rockefeller's mind whirred. He weighed risks. He dreamed strategies. The prospect of oil was terrifying but irresistible. If he was cautious, he could avoid disaster. If he was bold, he could seize a future greater than he had ever dared imagine. The candle in the window sputtered long into the night. And so, in the winter of his youth, John D. Rockefeller stood poised at the edge of a new empire, uncertain but unswayed, his destiny about to ignite. Part 2. Baptism by oil, the road to standard. There was a sharp tang in the air, an oily scent that stung the nostrils and clung to the skin. In the muddy, makeshift camps of Titusville, Pennsylvania, fortune hunters and visionaries clawed at the earth, unleashing torrents of rock oil. The year was 1863, and the world was changing faster than most men could reckon. John D. Rockefeller, not 30 years old, watched carefully from Cleveland, collecting every scrap of news from the oil fields, even as the chaos of the Civil War raged across the land. The war had proven a crucible for Rockefeller and Clark, an era of volatility, but also of dizzying opportunity. Soldiers marched, but so did the price of grains and meats. The partnership prospered, yet Rockefeller's gaze was increasingly drawn to those strange barrels of oil rolling over the rails from Pennsylvania. He watched as men, fueled by wild hope, risked everything and often lost. Oil was an unruly beast, flooding markets one day, evaporating the next. It was expensive to ship, unstable to store, and even more volatile to sell. Fortunes were made and lost in a heartbeat. But Rockefeller sensed something beneath the frenzy, an untapped order waiting to be imposed. The first step into the oil trade. It was a small refinery, little more than a cluster of vats and stills perched on the banks of Kingsbury Run. In 1863, Rockefeller and Clark, joined by Samuel Andrews, a chemist with a knack for oil refinement, invested in the business. Andrews' wife could not stand the smell of oil, but John D. was fascinated by the acrid aroma and the endless possibilities it signaled. At first, he hesitated to risk the stability he'd worked so hard to attain. Oil was a gamble, but Rockefeller was not like the wildcatters who flooded Titusville. He brought to oil the same methodical discipline that had governed every penny of his youth. Where others saw chaos, John saw only systems waiting to be forged. Control the supply, discipline the business, and the price will follow, he said, scribbling in his journal by candlelight. The world was awash in crude oil, but the process of turning it into kerosene, the clear, flameless oil that illuminated homes across America, was expensive, dirty, and dangerous. Refineries exploded regularly. Pollution blackened streams and meadows. The price careened with every rumor of a new well or a sudden glut. Rockefeller's approach was simple. He demanded nothing short of perfection. The refinery's books were soon as neat and exacting as his own ledgers had been at Hewitt and Tuttle. He improved yields, cut waste, bargained for every barrel, and imposed a ruthless efficiency. Every drop, every penny had its place. Others ridiculed such obsessive order, but Rockefeller had seen too much threadbare hunger and blind luck in his life to embrace waste. "Watch the costs, and the profits will take care of themselves," he whispered, a mantra gifted by hardship itself. Severing ties, claiming destiny. By 1865, Rockefeller had lost patience with slow partners and small minds. The partnership with Clark frayed at the edges, differences in ambition and vision turning to open argument. In a legendary act of resolve, Rockefeller offered to buy his partners out. An auction followed. It was tense, silent, and harrowing. Rockefeller held his nerve, bidding for everything he was worth, and then some. At last, it was his. The refinery, the future, even the risk. The Clark brothers yielded, and John D. Rockefeller assumed near total control. He was 25 years old. A new world was now his to command. Kerosene was king in those days. Before electrification, it was kerosene lamps that brightened night for America's families. But the oil business, still chaotic, was as much about braving disaster as it was about building fortunes. There were fires, always fires. The refinery itself seemed almost cursed, ablaze one moonless night. Workers formed frantic lines to fight the flames. Rockefeller stood, jaw set, watching the men he had hired risk their lives for his enterprise. When dawn came, blackened and exhausted, he paid every man for his valor. "We will rebuild better than before," he promised. And so they did. Each crisis, each setback, was a challenge to solve, a puzzle to master. Rockefeller invested in safety, in science, in the unglamorous details that separated the enduring from the doomed. The secret to empire: integration. If oil was going to be the new lifeblood of the nation, it had to flow smoothly, from wells in Pennsylvania to refineries in Cleveland, from barrels on docks to lamps in Manhattan parlors. Standing at the heart of this tumult was Rockefeller, placing himself at the central spine, connecting every part of the process. He watched with a cold, calculating eye as competitors squabbled over limited railroad capacity. The Pennsylvania Railroad, Erie, and others gouged them at every turn. This, Rockefeller saw, was the choke point. Whoever could wield shipping power could squeeze the oil business like a python. He acted with careful stealth. With other major refiners, he founded the South Improvement Company, striking secret deals with the railroads for preferential rates and rebates, while competitors, locked out of the secret, paid dearly. Chaos erupted when word spread. Angry oil men flooded the streets. There were threats, smashed offices, even sabotage. The public backlash was fierce, but Rockefeller had learned another principle. The public's outrage fades, but advantage endures. To control risk and keep profits steady, John began to buy out and ally with as many refiners as possible. Through persuasion, persistence, and sometimes intimidation, he rolled up Cleveland's refineries into one great enterprise. Some called it high-handed, even ruthless. For Rockefeller, it was survival. "It is not my duty to make competitors rich," he said. "If they would rather work with me than against me, there is a place for them." He called his new alliance the Standard Oil Company, a simple name, but one that would soon define the age. Family and faith amidst the storm. Amidst the mounting turmoil, Rockefeller married Laura Spelman in 1864. Laura was gentle, compassionate, and quietly strong, a schoolteacher and the daughter of an abolitionist. Together, they created a home filled with warmth, order, and faith. Children followed: Elizabeth, Alice, Alta, Edith, and John D. Jr. Laura was a solace and a moral compass, fierce without ostentation, firm and nurturing. Even as his empire grew, Rockefeller returned often to family and church. He tithed faithfully, helped the needy, and refused to let fortune twist his character. Yet, as the nation roared ahead into industrial expansion, John moved with it, always outpacing disaster and decline. A new Goliath. By 1870, Standard Oil controlled the vast majority of refining in Cleveland, and more every day. Where oil and money met rail, river, or telegraph, Rockefeller's shadow grew. He was not content to be merely rich. He wanted to be secure, insulated from fickle markets and the sway of unpredictable men. Each acquisition, each new process, was another brick in the fortress he built. Still, enemies multiplied. Newspapers railed, decrying his secrecy, his methods, his collusion with railroads. Competitors condemned him. Yet, the public continued to pour oil into their lamps, grateful for a cleaner and more reliable product than the market had ever delivered. Rockefeller responded the only way he knew, with further discipline, further consolidation. "The day of combination is here to stay," he declared. "Individualism has gone, never to return." Inside his private heart, Rockefeller felt neither joy nor fear. He was a man driven by necessity, by the memory of want and the fear of chaos, not by frenzied greed. His wealth was to him a buffer against the hunger, uncertainty, and humiliation of childhood. As his empire expanded, he neither reveled in public accolades nor shrank from public scorn. At night, after long days spent poring over ledgers, contracts, and expansion plans, he knelt in quiet prayer, asking for guidance. "All my fortune comes from God," he wrote to Laura, "and it shall serve his purposes." But the world wouldn't let him rest easily. Crisis and opportunity lay just ahead, ready to test the resolve and the empire of the richest man in America. Part 3. Empire under siege, competition, crisis, and consolidation. The clocks of Cleveland's Euclid Avenue chimed midnight as John D. Rockefeller, restless, rose from bed. The city slept, muffled by snow, but in Rockefeller's mind, silent storms raged. Standard Oil was ascendant, its reach fanning out from the Lake Erie refineries across America's rails and rivers. But with every fresh victory, the enemies multiplied. Threats now lurked not only in boardrooms but in the furious columns of newspapermen, the courtrooms of judges, and even the halls of Congress. Rumors came to Rockefeller like the wind, carrying word of secret alliances, panicked competitors, and, worse yet, desperate men willing to take ruinous risks. The oil fields of Pennsylvania, once filled with wildcatters and small drillers, were growing organized, banding together to fight what they called the Cleveland Octopus. Railroads, squeezed by Standard's demands, plotted countermoves, and everywhere, angry headlines screamed about monopoly, about the death of competition. The Pennsylvania Rebellion. In 1872, the first true crisis erupted, the announcement of the South Improvement Company. A covert pact for secret freight rates ignited a firestorm across Pennsylvania. Petroleum Association men gathered in Titusville's muddy streets, vowing to resist Standard's aggression. There were raucous rallies and sabotage. Oil producers, rebuffed by the railroads now bound to Rockefeller, clubbed together, organizing boycotts and even raiding Standard tank cars. The outrage was so great, it triggered state legislative investigations. For the first time in his career, Rockefeller felt the force of public fury. His name spat in the streets, his tactics denounced as un-American, his image lampooned in every major newspaper. Rockefeller blinked, but never buckled. Public pressure forced him to publicly dissolve the South Improvement Company, but behind the scenes, his network of alliances, rebates, and exclusive deals continued to thicken. The ordeal taught him a hard lesson. In the new age of mass communication and democratic politics, power could not rely on secrecy alone. The rules of the game were changing. The birth of the trust. If others saw Standard's dominance as a threat, Rockefeller saw it as a promise unfulfilled. The oil business cried out for stability, reliability, and order. A reliable product at a fair price delivered to every city and household. To bring this vision to life, in 1882, Rockefeller and his closest advisors constructed a new organizational innovation, the Standard Oil Trust. Dozens of companies, scattered across New York, Ohio, New Jersey, Indiana, and more, were officially bound into a single trust, ruled by 9 hand-picked trustees. Ownership was still technically distributed, but all real power flowed to the trust board, essentially Rockefeller himself. This new structure gave Standard Oil flexibility to grow, evade restrictive state laws, and, most critically, act as one all-seeing, all-powerful entity. Competitors sputtered in outrage, lawsuits flew, but the trust form spread, not just in oil, but in sugar, steel, tobacco, and railroads, becoming the signature of the Gilded Age. Governments scrambled to respond. State legislatures passed antitrust statutes. Journalists, now armed with the growing power of a free press, began to probe Standard Oil's secrets. Ida Tarbell, daughter of a ruined Pennsylvania oilman, was quietly gathering the threads that would one day expose Rockefeller to the world. Endurance and expansion. Rockefeller pressed on, unmoved by slander or legislative threat. One by one, he bought out or broke his competitors. He slashed waste and improved quality. Where once kerosene reeked and smoked, now Standard produced a clean, dependable fuel that lit cities and towns. He built new pipelines, bypassing the hated railroads entirely. He created subsidiaries for barrel making, canning, and even glue, integrating every part of the oil process under Standard's roof. Competitors who surrendered often found a place at his table, sometimes richer than they had ever been. Those who resisted often vanished, their plants bought at rock-bottom rates after inevitable bankruptcy. The extraordinary discipline and order that had marked his childhood now scaled magnificently. Every Monday at 10 a.m., Rockefeller oversaw meetings with his top executives, the legendary Standard Oil Board. Quiet, meticulous, emotionless, John reviewed every account, demanded explanations for every variance, and urged innovation without mercy for inefficiency. His personal habits set the tone. He dressed simply, rose early, attended church, and led his family in prayer. Gold-leafed invitations to society galas went unanswered. To outsiders, Rockefeller was an enigma, detached, humorless, even cold. To those who worked by his side, he was immensely focused, sometimes paternal, quick to reward absolute loyalty and devotion to duty. Personal shadows. Yet as his fortune grew, Rockefeller's health began to fail. In the late 1870s, chronic dyspepsia and mysterious nerve pains plagued him. Stressed and strained, his once dark hair began falling out. Alopecia soon rendered him nearly bald, forcing him to wear discreet wigs, which he ordered in secret. The pressures of power, it seemed, extracted a personal price. Laura, ever his anchor, worried over both his health and soul. She pressed him to relax, to spend long summer months at the family's Forest Hill estate. He took solace in gardening, a small, controlled world of order where he could bend nature gently to his will. With his children, he was stern but fair. With the public, increasingly remote. Rumors swirled of hidden cruelty, of injustices done for profit. Rockefeller seldom replied, refusing to dignify what he saw as envy and misunderstanding. Testing the titans. The 1880s brought new threats. The discovery of vast oil fields in Lima, Ohio, unleashed a torrent of cheap, sulfurous crude that many refiners rejected as unusable. Rockefeller, undeterred, hired scientists to develop improved refining methods. "We will master this oil too," he declared. Soon, Standard's chemists turned Lima's black rivers into shining kerosene, selling where others dared not. Another victory, quiet, technical, and absolute. Abroad, the world was awakening to oil's potential. London, Paris, and Berlin flickered with American flames. Standard opened offices in Russia and Asia, its tankers spanning the globe. John's vision leapt continents as easily as it had crossed county lines. The gathering storm. Yet with expansion came exposure. Competitors formed alliances. State attorneys launched inquiries. The press, emboldened, called for action. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, targeting the abuses of monopoly. At first, Standard seemed untouchable. The craftiness of the trust's legal structure baffled even the most determined regulators. But the air was electric with rebellion. The public now saw the monopolist as a villain, the system as rigged. And John D. Rockefeller, the boy who had once scraped together pennies in rural New York, stood atop a mountain that threatened to collapse beneath his feet. The real trial of his empire was yet to come, a trial that would test not just his fortune, but the very idea of American capitalism. Part 4. The Day of Reckoning. Confronting antitrust and the birth of philanthropy. The 1890s dawned with a cold wind of change. In the fury and thunder of the age, John D. Rockefeller stood as the very image of the American tycoon, wealthier, more powerful, and more secretive than any man the nation had produced. Yet beneath the stone facade, the ground was shifting, inexorable as the tides. For every lamp Standard Oil illuminated, a new shadow stretched behind it. Sherman's shadow. The Sherman Antitrust Act hung over the American business world like a sword. Every contract, combination, or conspiracy in restraint of trade or commerce, declared the law, was hereby illegal. Standard Oil's intricate web of trusts, subsidiaries, secret rebates, and preferred rates now faced inexorable government scrutiny. Public anger boiled. Newspaper barons ran endless exposés, lampooning Rockefeller as an octopus whose tentacles choked commerce and democracy alike. The name Standard Oil became code for every sin of monopoly. Robber Baron, they called him. And though Rockefeller maintained his silence in public, the attacks hit home in the quiet corners of his private life. He knew what the world thought of him, an ogre clutching power, crushing innovation and hope. Yet inside the boardrooms of Standard, Rockefeller maintained his methodical calm, a chess master steadily plotting his moves even as the pieces were swept by storms. The Ida Tarbell Crusade. No storm, perhaps, was more bitter or more personal than the campaign waged by Ida M. Tarbell, daughter of Franklin Tarbell, one of the many independent drillers broken by Standard's relentless advance. She wielded her pen as expertly as Rockefeller wielded his ledgers. Her serialized investigation in McClure's magazine peeled back the layers of secrecy, the backroom deals, the predatory pricing, the slow and steady consolidation of power. For the first time, the American public read, in vivid storytelling, the lives uprooted, the competitors crushed, and the civic power amassed by Standard. Tarbell's History of the Standard Oil Company became a sensation. Overnight, Rockefeller's business dealings went from legend to litigation. Behind closed doors, Rockefeller was slow to anger, but the Tarbell articles stung. He instructed his officials to respond with truth, but no slander, no personal attacks. It was a rule learned from Laura: never fight darkness with darkness. Thus, while others raged, Rockefeller remained silent, his focus bent on survival and transformation. Legal battles. Investigations multiplied. State attorneys general in Ohio, Missouri, and New York filed lawsuits demanding dissolution of the trust. Courtrooms filled with yellowed contracts and somber lawyers. In 1892, the Ohio Supreme Court ordered the dissolution of Standard Oil of Ohio, but Rockefeller's legal architects reorganized, shifting operations to New Jersey, where corporate law was more lenient. The Hydra was wounded but not slain. Each cut only made it more sophisticated, but the die was cast. Every round of litigation, every bit of public scorn, added weight to the notion that no single man or company should wield so much power. "We are simply efficient," Rockefeller maintained. Yet he began to sense that efficiency alone would not shield him from the changing spirit of the age. The old oak and the scythe. Through it all, Rockefeller aged. Lines deepened on his high forehead. His eyes, once shimmering with youthful ambition, grew guarded. Hair grew thin and silver. Laura's health faltered, and John found himself retreating more often to the quiet solace of family and gardens. He walked the lawns of Forest Hill, pruning roses in silence, feeling both the sting and privilege of his position. At times, he pondered the world he had shaped, a nation of industry, innovation, and unequaled prosperity, but also of rising inequality, unrest, and resentment. It was not enough to amass wealth, he realized. For years he had given, quietly, to his church, to local charities, to causes dear to Laura's heart. He began to consider his legacy, not in barrels or ledgers, but in lives touched, in opportunities created, and in wrongs, if possible, redeemed. The birth of organized philanthropy. In 1891, prompted by both personal conviction and public scrutiny, Rockefeller founded the University of Chicago, endowing it with millions. He demanded, in turn, that the students be driven not only by ambition, but by service and humility. He did not seek recognition, he often gave anonymously, signing checks as BLS for benevolence, love, and service. Through the advice of Frederick Gates, a Baptist minister who became his closest philanthropic advisor, Rockefeller began building an entirely new system for giving. He founded foundations first for education, then for medical research, public health, and the arts. The General Education Board, the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, and later the Rockefeller Foundation itself. These pioneering institutions would help eradicate diseases, reform Southern education, and fund groundbreaking science. Through giving, Rockefeller found a new kind of purpose. He saw money not as an end in itself, but as a tool, a means for repairing some of the harms and injustices that unchecked markets could create. His giving would ultimately total more than $500 million, more than any philanthropist before him. To his critics, this charity was a smokescreen, an attempt to redeem a reputation built on robbery. To Rockefeller, it was genuine atonement, a spiritual obligation, and perhaps the only way to see his fortune transmuted into something immortal. Family and legacy. Through the swirling crises, Laura remained his guiding light. Warm, devout, patient, she kept their home a sanctuary in the storm. Their children, especially John D. Rockefeller Jr., learned the virtues of thrift, piety, and stewardship. John Jr. grew to become his father's apprentice in charity and business alike. Where the senior Rockefeller was iron-willed, the junior was softer, more attuned to the public's growing desire for fairness and reform. Their partnership, often fraught with generational tension, would prove essential in the years to come. A nation in turmoil. Yet, victory was never assured. Economic crashes, most devastatingly in 1893 and again in 1907, threatened even Standard's hegemony. Every crisis forced Rockefeller to adapt, to shed old skins and adopt new strategies. Each time, Standard rebounded, often larger than before. Yet America was changing. The social fabric frayed amid strikes, union rebellions, and populist crusades. The era of buccaneering capital was ending. The question, looming like a specter, was whether Rockefeller's empire could endure, or whether, like the titans of Rome, it would scatter beneath the axe of public will. If Rockefeller was troubled, he rarely showed it. Steadfast in public, humble in prayer, quiet in his giving, he watched as the world prepared for a final reckoning. The government's eyes had grown sharper, the people's demands had grown louder, and even as he aged into his 7th decade, John D. Rockefeller prepared one last time to defend the vision that had shaped not only his life, but an entire civilization. Part 5. The breakup of Standard Oil and the shape of modern America, spring 1906. Beneath the grey towers of New York and the soot-stained smokestacks of Cleveland, the America Rockefeller had helped build was rising ever higher and beginning to roar in anger. Progressivism now seized the era. Trustbusters and reformers swept into Washington. At their head was President Theodore Roosevelt, stocky and quick-tempered, unafraid to point his big stick at America's largest fortunes. For over 30 years, Standard Oil had evaded, resisted, and outmaneuvered every attempt at governmental interference. But the tide was now unstoppable. Newspapers, propelled in part by Ida Tarbell's bestseller and further exposés, urged the government to act. The cry for reform reached fever pitch. The antitrust war begins. In November 1906, the United States government, armed with hundreds of pages of evidence and determined lawyers, filed a suit under the Sherman Antitrust Act to dissolve Standard Oil. The trial, stretching over 4 years, became a drama for the whole nation. Testimonies filled rooms with barrels, contracts, telegrams, and tales of intimidation and deal-making. Rockefeller, by now nearly retired from daily management, watched from the quiet of his Pocantico estate. His hair almost entirely white, his gaunt figure more monk than magnate. He offered humble, measured public statements and left the legal jousting to his lieutenants. There is nothing in all the charges of unfairness. The success of Standard Oil came simply from saving all possible waste and not from injuring others. But the courts and public sentiment now saw matters differently. Rockefeller, for all his efficiencies and vision, had also created an unprecedented concentration of economic power. Judges, reading the news as much as the law, saw empire rather than enterprise. In May 1911, the US Supreme Court delivered its historic ruling. Standard Oil, in undue restraint of trade, was to be dismantled, broken into 34 independent companies. The original colossus was shattered. A new economic order set loose. The aftermath, fractures and ascendance. The ruling did not end Rockefeller's wealth. Indeed, it multiplied it. Owning huge shares in all the spun-off companies, he watched as the fragments battled for supremacy, expanded into new markets, and saw their value soar. Names like Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, and others would, in time, become giants themselves. It was, in a curious twist, the validation of his original vision. The foundation, if disassembled, could send out strong, innovating parts, each inheriting the relentless drive for efficiency and dominance he'd instilled. But Rockefeller felt no private glee. The age of singular power was over, and a new, more uncertain world of regulation and scrutiny had begun. The public, meanwhile, rejoiced. Progressive reformers hailed it as the end of monopoly's tyranny. Regular Americans filling their lamps and soon their car engines barely noticed the change. Personal reflections, old age, and the sense of time. Relieved of business cares, Rockefeller entered an unexpected late-life bloom. He walked for hours on his vast estates at Pocantico Hills, his stride slowed but unwavering. He became famous for his odd public habits, songbirds, long walks, the press of dimes into children's hands. "Save it," he would urge, eyes twinkling, and the delighted giving of silver coins to passing strangers. Some called him eccentric or senile, but those close to him saw a profound, childlike joy emerging from the iron self-discipline of youth. "I can think of nothing I want," he confided to a reporter. "I have everything this world can give." But peace and health had come at great cost. Nervous exhaustion, sleepless nights, the early loss of hair and vitality, and years of deep stress. He'd once called out in the depths of business trials, "I would give all the money I have for just a few happy years." Now, in the twilight, the happiness had finally come. Laura's passing, the end of an era. Pain, however, cannot be kept at bay by riches alone. In 1915, Laura Spelman Rockefeller, his wife and lifelong companion, fell gravely ill. John nursed her, reading scripture, recalling their earliest years of struggle and hope before empire crept between them. She died that same year. Her legacy of charity and faith soon formalized in the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial, fund devoted solely to benevolent causes. Her loss cast a deep shadow. Rockefeller grew quieter, his world smaller, his daily prayers more introspective than ever. Family now became his chief concern. He spent long hours walking and counseling his children and grandchildren, insistent upon thrift, kindness, and stewardship. He leaned especially on his devoted son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., whose careful, reformist heart reassured him that the burden of wealth might now be wielded for the world's good. The world changes, the automobile and the modern age. Around him, technology ricocheted hilariously forward. The world of kerosene lamps was vanishing, replaced by electric lights, and more critically, by the riotous roar of the automobile. Henry Ford, another titan of a different breed, had loosed the Model T to the masses. Gasoline, once a waste product, became the black gold of a new century. Rockefeller watched these changes with keen, if wary, interest. He met Ford, a fellow Ohio farm boy, and admired his single-mindedness, but also glimpsed a future where oil and industry itself might be battered by storms no one man could control. The Great War in Europe, soon to scourge the globe, would make clear the indispensable reach of oil, now not just a commodity, but a weapon, a motive for empire, a promise, and a threat. But Rockefeller, closing in on his 80s, knew that his work was now memory, a legacy, not a plan. The world would have to shape itself. His era, for better or worse, was closing fast. Philanthropy as immortality. Increasingly, John's identity was fused not with empire, but with philanthropy. The Rockefeller Foundation, born in 1913 with an unprecedented endowment, became a force for eradicating disease, funding medical research, improving education and public health, and addressing hunger and poverty worldwide. In its first decades, it would help defeat hookworm in the American South, lay the groundwork for modern medicine, and support scientific breakthroughs that would transform the 20th century. He shifted from boardrooms to the long, quiet work of global betterment. Gone was the notorious secrecy here. He insisted on open processes, scientific rigor, and public benefit. He took enormous pride when his foundations gave rise to the first school of public health, funded medical research at Johns Hopkins, supported agricultural reform, and near the end of his life, played a key role in bringing about the Green Revolution, a new kind of legacy. In public, Rockefeller was often misunderstood, celebrated for his vast giving, yet also still pilloried as the architect of monopoly. In private, he remained loyal to origins, to the simple teachings of his mother, to the Christian faith Laura had lived by, and to the family that bore his name. He watched with quiet pride as John Jr. and his grandsons shaped a philanthropic empire as influential as any oil company had ever been. America, for all its upheavals, was the richer and more complicated for his presence. He had created, and then, by necessity, pioneered a way to give back, turning the tools of business into the tools of reform. In these waning years, Rockefeller greeted each dawn not as a conqueror, but as a steward, a man whose mission had changed, but whose resolve, forged in the furnace of childhood hardship, never faded. But the final passage still lay ahead. Years of quiet reflection, the handing down of responsibilities, the shaping of a family legacy, and the last inevitable journey into memory. Part 6. The sunset years, legacy, lessons, and the passing of an era. The great rooms of the Rockefeller mansions filled with the laughter of grandchildren and the gentle tap of a cane on marble floors. Outside, the gardens at Pocantico burst with color each spring, their patterns mapped over the years by John's own hands, every bed of roses a living ledger of care and attention. As John D. Rockefeller entered his 9th decade, he moved more slowly, yet his mind kept its old fire. He was no longer master of industry, but patriarch of a growing dynasty. The family gathers. Time, at long last, had become his own. Freed from the perpetual rumble of telegraphs, board meetings, and lawsuits, he steeped himself in the company of family, John Jr. and Abby Aldrich. His son's intelligent and progressive wife visited often, always with the latest brood of children in tow. The chime and bustle of little voices delighted the old man. He would stoop awkward but eager to press a dime into each small hand, intoning his favorite creed, save, and you'll have the foundation for your future. The Rockefeller family meal was a ritual still governed by the old habits. No waste, no extravagance. The stories of hardship, of Eliza and Big Bill, of days with a little more than bread and molasses were reshared so that each new generation would understand that discipline, not fortune, was the true gift handed down. Life's quiet pleasures. Nature became John's constant companion. He walked, as he had in youth, sunrise to sunset across fields and wooded trails. Journalists, eager for a glimpse of America's most famous retiree, sometimes perched in the bushes with sketch pads, capturing the sight of the stooped elder, straw hat shading his wrinkled face, pausing to study a robin's nest or a freshly sprouted shoot. "Outdoors is the best medicine," he would say with a twinkle. He cultivated not only flowers, but old friendships, former foes in business now aged and often infirm, sometimes wrote or visited. Rockefeller answered their letters with warm nostalgia, sometimes humor. "There is plenty of room at the top," he quipped, "after the competition falls away." Despite mounting fame, he remained deeply private. Sundays found him in the front pew at church, hymnal in hand, singing softly beside the remnants of his closest friends. He refused speeches, interviews, and except on the rarest occasions, public praise. The guiding hand. John D. Rockefeller Jr. increasingly became the executor of his father's wishes, both in business and in philanthropy. Jr. was in many ways his father's opposite, sensitive, diplomatic, shaped by modern ideas of corporate responsibility. Together with Abby, he ushered the family's charitable legacy into the new century, guiding gifts to international causes and supporting science, education, the arts, and peace. Under John Jr., the family's legacy took new forms. The construction of Rockefeller Center in New York, a beacon of employment during the Great Depression, stood as a symbol of hope and modernity. The establishment of the Museum of Modern Art, the expansion of national parks, and countless other civic projects reflected a changing America and a family conscious of its place in it. Senior watched with pride, offering counsel and gentle rebuke as needed, but never micromanaging. "The day comes for every man to let go," he confided to a friend. "Our duty is to prepare those who come after." Lessons and regrets. Visitors, seeking the secret of his towering success, were surprised by the humility of his answers. "Try to turn every disaster into an opportunity," he said often, remembering not victories but the crises that had forged him. "I have made many mistakes," he would admit, "sometimes hurt men without meaning to. Always hold to a cause greater than yourself, however imperfectly." He carried regrets quietly. The ruthless tactics of Standard Oil's infancy left wounds, not all of which could be healed by charity. He read the Bible each morning, finding comfort in parable and prayer, but he never fully escaped the ache of old battles, yet he accepted the burdens of memory. "God gave me my money," he once declared, not as boasting, but as an invocation. He interpreted his wealth as trust, not birthright. The labor, thrift, and discipline that had built it were virtues he continued to preach, even in the golden hush of late life, alloyed with the world's changes. Rockefeller witnessed the world lurch from Gilded Age to modernity. Automobiles now rumbled past, electricity shimmered in every city, and women like his own formidable daughter-in-law Abby filled new halls of power. Wars reshaped the maps. Old monarchies fell. The Rockefeller fortune, carefully diversified and shrewdly managed, weathered every storm. The trust that once ruled oil now fostered medicine, agriculture, and knowledge in every corner of the globe. In letters, John sometimes wondered if this legacy would be valued above all others. A private farewell. By the 1920s, Rockefeller reached the rare rank of centenarian. Public curiosity about his age became legend. Children wrote from distant provinces for advice or a coin. Modern reporters, never having known want, sometimes lampooned his habits, his simple meals, early bedtimes, and Sunday school lessons. His replies remained gentle, even playful. One misty June morning of 1937 at 97, John D. Rockefeller passed quietly at his Florida estate. The world paused in recognition. The newspapers that once decried his power now lauded his charity, his industrial courage, and his complicated, towering spirit. His family gathered in private. John Jr. embraced Abby and the grandchildren, reading from the Psalms. The era of the oil king was over, but another broader era, shaped by vision, giving, and resilience, had just begun. The living legacy. Today, Rockefeller's legacy pulses not only through the corporations that emerged from Standard Oil, but through universities, hospitals, research labs, and farms around the world. His descendants, large in number and diverse in interests, have shaped art, architecture, environmentalism, and public health. Yet it is perhaps in the ethic left behind of discipline, stewardship, and the insistence that wealth be matched by responsibility that John D. Rockefeller's presence still lingers. He was a man of contradictions, ruthless and charitable, secretive and open, shaped by want and driven by vision. The son of a shady peddler, the pious student clutching every penny, the king of oil, the humble gardener between all, one thread runs true. In every age, his story challenges us, not merely what fortune can you amass, but what future can you build when all that remains is your legacy. Part 7. The heirs take the reins. Transition to a new age. The legacy of John D. Rockefeller did not vanish with the lowering of his casket into the soil at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Instead, it hovered, a mantle only partially visible, in the hearts and hands of his descendants. As the last echoes of the 19th century faded, the name Rockefeller became more than just a symbol of fortune. It became an ever-evolving promise of stewardship, innovation, and public duty, a living blueprint for what immense wealth could force, for good or ill, upon the rushing world. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the quiet builder. John D. Rockefeller Jr., always more contemplative, more cautious than his father, stood at the helm of the vast charitable and financial trust that had been assembled. The elder Rockefeller had trained him relentlessly, shaping him at times with severity, but always with an unshakable sense of mission. To Junior fell the monumental task of translating his father's vision into the reality of a new age, where his father had dealt with the raw, turbulent elements of competition. John Jr. navigated subtler, but no less treacherous waters. Politics, public scrutiny, and the shifting values of a society grappling with modernity. For him, the family's role was clear: to serve, to create, and to repair. Almost immediately, Junior set about expanding the philanthropic reach of the family. The Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial, originally dedicated to advancing the cause of education for African Americans and women, now flourished on a national scale. The Rockefeller Foundation's endowment was grown and directed with scientific precision, each grant carefully measured for the public good. Junior believed deeply in the possibilities of democracy and enlightenment. His faith in institutions, schools, museums, global health was as strong as his father's had been in commerce. Rockefeller Center, a city within a city. Perhaps no project better encapsulated the new Rockefeller era than the construction of Rockefeller Center in New York. Conceived in the agony of the Great Depression, financed in the leanest of years, it was a bold leap into the unknown, a complex of art, commerce, and civic space, rising like a promise above Midtown Manhattan. John Jr. oversaw every detail, insisting that the project provide jobs for thousands while bringing beauty and joy to the city. Sculptors, muralists, and architects mingled with bricklayers and engineers. The Prometheus statue, the gleaming skating rink, the Radio City Music Hall, each became an icon of American hope and resilience. Rockefeller Center would, in time, become the soul of modern New York, a locus of celebration, commerce, and culture. And through the halls and gardens, John Jr. moved softly, more administrator than autocrat, guiding the family's holdings toward this new ideal of public service, expanding the boundaries. As the 20th century advanced, the Rockefellers did not shy away from controversy or challenge. John Jr. and Abby herself, a passionate advocate for modern art and social reform, pushed forward on causes dear to them, regardless of public misunderstanding. They threw the family's weight behind the Museum of Modern Art, supporting avant-garde artists who had little place in the polite galleries of the past. They became patrons of conservation, using their resources to help protect the national park system, devoting vast tracts of land in Wyoming, Maine, and elsewhere to the American people. Few families since the great Renaissance houses of Europe had evolved so intentionally. There were bump scandals, disputes over money, political criticism, but steadily, the Rockefellers transformed oil wealth into broad public benefit. The new generation, 5 brothers and a legacy. The children of John Jr. and Abby, now known as the Rockefeller brothers, grew up in a world of both privilege and immense expectation. Nelson, Lawrence, Winthrop, John III, and David each carved distinctive marks on American life. Nelson, the most outspoken, entered politics, eventually becoming governor of New York and later Vice President of the United States. Lawrence dedicated himself to conservation on a massive scale, championing parks and environmental policy long before green became a global buzzword. John III obsessed over Asian art and humanitarian projects. David became a titan in international banking, shaping post-war finance from his seat at Chase Manhattan. Bound together by blood and upbringing, sometimes divided by personality, the brothers worked as a team on the major projects that defined the mid-century, rebuilding bomb-blasted Europe, promoting cultural exchange, funding global medical research, and underwriting much of the United Nations headquarters itself. A family of influence with new values. The myth once ascribed unlimited power to the first Rockefeller. In truth, the family's new influence was softer rooted in networks, philanthropy, and culture. As much as in commerce, the Rockefellers sat on countless boards, endowed universities, shaped public health, and worked quietly and sometimes invisibly to steer the nation's future with a steady hand. Yet the weight of inheritance often pressed heavily. Public suspicion of the rich had not vanished. Every donation was both blessing and target. Every policy recommendation, however selfless, was picked apart for motive and effect. Critics wondered aloud if democracy itself could thrive alongside family fortunes, this vast, enduring the storms. The world itself was not always grateful. 2 world wars, The Cold War that followed, mass protest, and the fury of new populist movements sometimes threatened to sweep away all old institutions, family dynasties, and philanthropic empires included. Yet, through disaster and transformation, the Rockefellers kept adapting. In the oil shocks of the 1970s, as energy became both a political bludgeon and an ecological concern, their own Standard Oil heirs restructured, merged, and survived. The family continued to evolve, to seek new causes, and to offer, in the sharp light of public scrutiny, examples of engaged stewardship and measured humility. Eternal questions. In quiet moments, heirs pondered the same dilemmas their forebear had faced. How can wealth serve? How can power be wielded without abuse? Where does duty end and ambition begin? These questions unanswered became the soul of the modern Rockefeller story. Not merely the tale of a fortune created, but a parable of continuity, reinvention, and the never-ending struggle to do right with the gifts of providence and history. The story was no longer just one man's. It had become the ongoing labor of a family, generation after generation, each one, in some way, facing the world that John D. Rockefeller had irrevocably changed. Part 8. The changing face of philanthropy and global impact. The world that John D. Rockefeller had shaped by oil and order moved with a new and restless energy. In the decades following his death, the Rockefeller name itself became a symbol not just of wealth, but of a restless, searching philanthropy, a drive to solve problems on a planetary scale. As nations rebuilt after the Second World War and the old world splintered into new, the foundations set in motion by one man's ambition found themselves at the heart of a changing epoch. The global reach of the Rockefeller Foundation. By the mid-20th century, the Rockefeller Foundation was wielding resources and insight on a scale once reserved only for governments. Guided now by professional managers, staffed by scientists, doctors, and scholars, its philosophy matured from charity to strategic intervention, not just aid, but transformation. Nowhere was this more striking than in the crusade against disease. In Latin America, the Foundation's physicians routed out yellow fever and malaria. In Africa and South Asia, public health campaigns built on models first tested in rural America and the American South drove rates of worm-borne illness and infant mortality steadily downward. Leaders like Alan Gregg and Warren Weaver, reporting to John D. Rockefeller III and his brothers, launched new ventures into medical research. They laid foundations for vaccines, championed the use of antibiotics, and helped local governments develop the capacity for modern care. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, now the Rockefeller University, became a proving ground for Nobel laureates, from medicine's earliest days to the molecular revolution. Their campaigns circled the globe: vaccination, nutrition, family planning, intervening in the cycles of poverty and disease that had defined so much of human history, sowing the seeds of revolution, the Green Revolution. It was hunger, though, that drew the Rockefeller legacy to a new level, forever linking the name not just to oil and wealth, but to the very question of how humanity would sustain itself on a crowded earth. In the 1940s and 1950s, Rockefeller-backed agronomists partnered with local scientists in Mexico, India, and the Philippines in search of high-yield crops and modern agricultural practices. They bred new varieties of wheat and rice, doubling and then tripling the yield per acre. The Green Revolution was born, fusing science, local wisdom, and Rockefeller funding. The movement saved millions from famine lifting whole nations from the edge of disaster. Yet, it was not without criticism. Monoculture, loss of tradition, and ecological risk followed. The family, too, was forced to reckon with the unintended consequences. Could even the best philanthropy escape the shadow of hubris? A new world of questions. The world's problems grew increasingly complex. Global power, once the domain of industrial tycoons and armies, now danced to new tunes, colonial empires dissolving, new states rising, technology and communication shrinking distances. The Rockefeller institutions adapted, funding peace studies, international exchange, and human rights, even as the Cold War darkened the horizon. At the United Nations, whose headquarters rose on land donated by the family, Rockefeller influence could be felt, but never monopolized. This was the paradox of modern philanthropy. The greater the ambition, the deeper the entanglement with politics, unforeseen effects, and the ever-pressing need for humility. Rockefeller women, expanding the legacy. It was in this crucible of change that Rockefeller women began to step forward. Abby Aldrich. Rockefeller's vision blossomed at MoMA. Her granddaughter, Abby, Babs, Rockefeller Mosey led foundations, and others championed education, ecology, and civil rights. The new heirs left the shadow of the oil king and stepped into light as leaders in their own right. Their focus, more than ever, turned to the pressing needs of the age: urban poverty, racial injustice, environmental destruction. In a world no longer built upon conquest, but connection, the Rockefeller approach to giving now relied as much on listening as on leading. Stewardship at a crossroads. By the late 20th century, a new wave of Rockefellers scattered across continents and fields as diverse as economics, ecology, journalism, and art sought to redefine what stewardship meant. Some, like Lawrence Rockefeller, became pioneers of conservation, laying the groundwork for sustainable finance and pushing for the preservation of wild spaces fiercely threatened by modern development. David Rockefeller, from his seat as chairman of Chase Manhattan, answered the call of global finance. His Rolodex filled with sovereigns, entrepreneurs, and revolutionaries. His cosmopolitan worldview helped guide US policy and business through turbulent wars and crises. Each generation faced new scrutiny, the public wary of inherited power. The grand old family homes, Caquet, Pocantico Hills, Seal Harbor, became settings for debates not only about legacy, but about relevance. Could the Rockefeller name stand, not for the concentrations of the past, but as a blueprint for responsible, democratic engagement with a fragile future? The power to change and to listen. Every new Rockefeller generation rebuilt the scaffolding of legacy, a structure that could easily tip into arrogance or retreat into nostalgia. But at their best, they persisted in what the elder Rockefeller had learned by his mother's side in Richford: discipline, humility, and the ceaseless idea that with great fortune comes the obligation to build, to repair, and to nurture. Policies changed, mistakes were made and owned, priorities shifted. Some heirs left public life, others embraced activism, but always with the hard-won understanding that the greatest challenge and the greatest gift was not in amassing power, but in wielding it wisely. The world watches. By the dawn of the 21st century, the Rockefeller name had become woven into the very institutions of modern life: universities and hospitals, museums and parks, global public health campaigns. Yet so too had their greatest lesson: that stewardship is never finished. that every age must choose anew the meaning of wealth, power, and service. Beyond the walls of their foundations, the world roared with conflict, innovation, and uncertainty. The next chapter's climate change, technology, human rights, awaited leaders who could match fortune with wisdom and daring. The dynasty that began with a barefoot boy in rural New York and reached its first zenith in the oil fields of Pennsylvania and the counting houses of Cleveland now cast its gaze forward once more. The future, once a matter of steel nerves and ledgers, had become the work of millions, connected by hope, necessity, and the relentless possibility that one family, in all its complexity, might help to illuminate the path. Part 9. Echoes and Reckonings. The Legacy Tested. The past revisited. The 20th century's closing decades found the Rockefellers in a world more complicated than their legendary ancestor could have imagined. Reverence for private wealth had yielded to skepticism, and with each economic crisis or scandal, public attention sharpened anew on those whose privilege and access seemed inherited, not earned. For the Rockefeller family, this scrutiny was both a test and an inheritance. The descendants, now numbering in the hundreds and scattered across continents, bore the weight of the name, some proudly, others with trepidation. They knew the stories. The barefoot boy who became a titan, the empire built from discipline and shrewdness, the philanthropy that shaped medicine, agriculture, art, and education. But modernity brought new questions. Was wealth itself, no matter how wielded, compatible with democracy? Could the legacy of oil and industry stand in an era now threatened by environmental catastrophe? The family reconciles with oil. The world's growing concern over fossil fuels and the gathering storm of climate change brought new scrutiny to the very foundation of the Rockefeller empire. Throughout the late 20th and early 21st centuries, some family members took a radical turn. In a move that made headlines worldwide, Rockefeller heirs divested their holdings in ExxonMobil and other Standard Oil descendants, citing not just market logic but moral conviction. The age of oil must yield, they contended, to one of sustainability and responsibility. Lawrence Rockefeller's pioneering support for national parks and renewable energy research in the late 20th century was now taken up by younger generations. The family's philanthropic vehicles retooled, investing billions in clean energy, environmental protection, and climate advocacy. Critics sometimes scoffed, was it penance or prescience? But more than symbolism, these acts signaled a decisive shift, the willingness to face history and amend its course. Being a Rockefeller means not being afraid of change. One great-grandchild remarked publicly, "We do not worship the past, we try to redeem it." Public good versus private legacy. As the philanthropic universe exploded, governments, celebrities, and new tech billionaires launching formidable charities of their own, the Rockefellers found themselves in a crowded field. Their response to AIDS, malaria, mass migration, and global inequality demanded not only funding, but cooperation and humility. Foundations that once operated as private fiefdoms transformed into collaborative hubs, inviting critique as well as partnership. Yet, with every accomplishment, there remained that subtle, unyielding question: had their wealth, in aggregate, helped or hurt? Did concentrated giving undercut democracy or foster it? In the passionate debates that swirled through foundations, family meetings, and the world's editorial pages, the Rockefellers maintained a singular stance: that stewardship is not the same as control, and that service even when imperfect, must be ceaseless. Reconciling with the public. The family opened more of their inner workings to the public. Kikwit became a place of scholarship and public tours. Archives were released, interviews were given. Some members took up public service, others advocated openly for tax reform, campaign finance transparency, and the dismantling of old taboos around privilege. Perhaps most radically, several heirs used their platform to challenge fellow elites, speaking on climate, health, and economic inequality, often at the risk of alienating old allies. There were rifts, some private, some played out in newsprint, but the willingness to face the world on its terms remained a hallmark, the atlas of philanthropy. The family's true legacy was not just its money, but the maps it had drawn for generations of philanthropists. The very idea of the American Foundation of Scientific Giving, impact measurement, and adaptive mission evolved from the principles Rockefeller Sr. had insisted upon generations before. Today, the Rockefeller Foundation, alongside countless institutions seeded by the family, stands as a living infrastructure, funding education, science, healthcare, environmental restoration, and policy worldwide. The Rockefeller University trains scientists from every nation. The family's museums, parks, and cultural endowments stand testament to their belief that art and beauty, as much as technology, build civilization. The hospitals they founded treat millions, yet the family continued to adapt, learning from each new era where their love of order, innovation, and careful planning could serve, and where it must yield to the wisdom of others. A story still in motion. At every family reunion, from bustling New York to quiet Maine, new generations ask the same questions that haunted John D. himself. Am I steward or master? Is legacy a burden or a gift? How can I serve while remaining myself? No definitive answers existed, but as long as there were Rockefellers questioning, striving, doubting, and building, the conversation continued. It was this willingness never to rest on reputation, never to trade humility for pride, always to renew the family's sense of duty before the eyes of an ever-watching public that made the Rockefellers more than a dynasty. It made them, in their own complex way, a family of pioneers still. Part 10. Reflections and the Unfolding Future. In the spiral of time. Time, that ultimate solvent of triumph and failure, has wound its spiral far beyond the days when young John D. Rockefeller walked with empty pockets through the chill New York fields. More than a century since his birth, the world he helped create is vastly changed, electrified, globalized, and, for all its advances, ever more complex. Yet the shape of Rockefeller's journey, and his family's, can still be traced through the living patterns of commerce, philanthropy, and enduring debate. Each era has forced a reckoning with the past, a new financial crash, a new disease, the never-resting engines of innovation and want. The tools and resources Rockefeller gathered and refined mastery of systems, discipline, relentless analysis, and strategic vision became the working DNA of modern organizations. His story, written in ledgers and contracts, sermons and prayers, was inherited not only by his bloodline, but by the very idea of organized giving and responsible capitalism. Now, his descendants scatter across many continents and causes, far removed from kerosene lamps and the belching furnaces of Cleveland. Some take up the family's business torch, others reinvest the fruits in arts, science, or the urgent problems of their day. Each generation begins again, confronting not only the opportunities of wealth, but the morality of its stewardship. Enduring lessons. Ask those who study Rockefeller's life scholars, CEOs, activists, and they may recite differing verdicts. To some, he was the original monopolist, cunning as he was ruthless. To others, he remains the father of modern philanthropy, whose methods, though imperfect, seeded the harvests upon which nations now depend. But step closer, read his private words, watch his family's endless debates, and another picture emerges, that of a man wrestling always with contradictions, a ferocity for progress, a piety for family and faith, a hunger for control, and a real ache for transcendence beyond mere riches. His mother's teaching, waste nothing, serve others, take nothing for granted, never deserted him, even when the world grew far too large for any single conscience to govern. His children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren may live luxuriously, but many bear also the self-imposed burden of scrutiny and duty, ever aware that the scales may one day tip back toward questioning all their forebear built, the echoes of choice. The world, too, grapples with his legacy. The age of oil that his cunning unleashed now faces both the grandeur of technological miracle and the existential threat of climate change. The old refineries, pipelines, and trust structures have mostly faded, replaced by green technologies and digital empires. Yet the underlying questions, the balance of power and public good, the morality of profit, the responsibility of those who wield resources, remain as urgent now as when Rockefeller first peered into the glistening black of a Pennsylvania oil barrel. In countless boardrooms, family charities, activist circles, and even among competitors, the dilemma persists. Can we master systems without being mastered by them? Can we build without dominating? Can giving ever balance the taking that created such gifts? Personal threads, national fabric. Rockefeller's legacy is not merely familial nor even institutional, but woven into American culture. At every crossroads where risk and reward, innovation and disruption, giving and withholding meet there, you will find some whisper of the debates and laws that John and his adversaries, friends, and family set in motion. Kykuit stone terraces witness both the laughter of children and the heavy conversations of heirs weighing the next move. The halls of Rockefeller University host young researchers who may never know the name's history. Rockefeller Center's Christmas tree glows over millions whose lives follow rhythms he never could have foreseen. And in quiet moments, in rooms from Beijing to Dakar, a teacher funded by a Rockefeller grant, a patient helped by a Rockefeller hospital, a scientist bred in Rockefeller's academic tradition offers proof that even the most complicated legacies carry possibilities for light. A story still unfolding. There is no neat moral, no simple ending. Rockefeller's story is, after all, the story of America's experiment with abundance, its power and peril, its hard-won wisdom, and its restless, unending revision. The oil king's empire, once so concrete, now lives as a question. What will each new age make of its fortune? The only sure thing is motion. Every generation, Rockefeller and otherwise, inherits the test he knew best, not to be satisfied with the world as it is, nor awed by the world as it was, but to strive always to build the world as it could be. And somewhere, perhaps in a humble coin, pressed into a child's hand, or the turning of soil in a family garden, the spirit of that old discipline lives anew. Save, build, improve. Find order in chaos. Grasp fortune not only as a prize, but as a responsibility. Bring light if you can. to darkness. So passes the story, unfinished, of the boy who became the richest man of his age, and whose journey still winds through lamp-lit nights, boardrooms, libraries, and the quiet rooms of memory toward new horizons, just beyond the reach of oil and gold and time.